The last door on the left. Ethan Harper had lived in cities his whole life, surrounded by the constant hum of cars, chatter, and fluorescent lights that never really went out. But after losing his job, his girlfriend, and nearly all of his savings, he found himself needing a place that wouldn't ask too many questions. So when he stumbled across a cheap listing for a boarding house on Belgrave Street, $400 a month, no credit check, he didn't hesitate. The place was old. Not the charming kind of old. The kind of old that made the wallpaper curl away from the walls like peeling skin, and the floorboards groan like tired bones. Still, it was quiet. Ethan figured he could survive 6 months there while he figured out what the hell to do with his life. The landlord, Mr. Calhoun, was a wiry, half-skeletal man with stained teeth and a voice like a broom scraping concrete. When Ethan first arrived, suitcase in hand, Calhoun gave him the key to room 2B, and a single warning. Don't go near the last door on the left. End of the hall, 2nd floor. You hear? Ethan blinked. What? Calhoun didn't blink. He just repeated, that door stays closed. Always. I catch you even near it, you're out. No refund. There was no hint of a joke in his voice. Ethan gave a short, awkward nod. Sure, yeah. Got it. He didn't get it, of course. Not then. But he would. The boarding house was quiet. Too quiet. The other tenants, maybe 6 or 7 people scattered across 2 floors, barely made a sound. No televisions blaring. No music. Just the occasional creak of footsteps at odd hours. And even then, the footsteps never came from the direction of that hallway. The door in question stood at the end of a corridor that ran parallel to Ethan's room. He passed it every time he took the back stairs, which he sometimes did just for a change of scenery. It didn't look like much, dark oak, no number, the brass knob blackened with age. But the moment you stepped into that stretch of hall, the temperature dropped. Just slightly. Just enough to notice. There were no vents. No windows. Just the door, and something else. A feeling. It wasn't fear exactly. More like, being watched. Judged. The other tenants never talked about it. One afternoon, Ethan asked a woman in the shared kitchen, a nervous, pale lady who always wore gloves even indoors, what was behind the door. She looked at him, wide-eyed, and simply said, "Don't ask." It was 3 weeks in when things started to change. Ethan began waking up at 3:03 a.m. every night. The first few times, he thought it was just insomnia. He'd been stressed, after all. But it wasn't just the waking. It was the cold. His room, normally warm from the old radiator in the corner, would be freezing, his breath visible in the dark. Then the sound started. Faint whispers. Soft knocks. Sometimes it was a dragging sound, like someone pulling cloth across wood. But when he got up to investigate, the hallway was always empty. The other rooms, silent. Once, he stood by his door with the lights off, ear pressed to the wall. And he heard it. Not a whisper, not a knock, but a giggle. Childlike. Gurgled. Wrong. On the 24th night, he snapped. It wasn't a decision, not really. It felt more like surrender. The air in his room was so thick and cold he could hardly breathe. The whispering was constant now, threading itself between the walls and into his skull like static. One voice, low and soft, repeating a single phrase. Come closer. At 3:06 a.m., barefoot and shivering, he walked down the hallway to the last door on the left. The temperature dropped with every step. The hallway lights flickered. The air buzzed like an old TV on a dead channel. He reached out and touched the knob. It was ice. The door creaked open with surprising ease. The room inside was pitch black. Not darkness in the absence of light sense. but darkness that swallowed light. His flashlight barely pierced the gloom. He stepped inside. The door shut behind him with a click. The first thing he noticed was the smell, wet earth and rust. The walls seemed to stretch the deeper he walked, the room shifting shape around him. The floorboards groaned under his weight like something was breathing beneath them. And then he saw it. A mirror. Tall. Framed in iron that curled like thorned vines. Its glass was cracked, spiderwebs running through its surface, but it reflected nothing. Not the room. Not Ethan. He stepped closer. Then, suddenly, there was something in the mirror. Not a reflection. A figure. Tall. Slender. Its limbs impossibly long, bent backward at odd angles. Its face was smooth and featureless, no eyes, no mouth. Just a void where a face should be. Then the mirror began to whisper. Not words. Thoughts. Feelings. Regret. Hunger. Despair. And then, finally, words. Now I see you. Ethan's legs turned to jelly. He staggered backward, but the room was no longer behind him. There were no walls. No door. Just blackness. And the figure stepped through the mirror. The last thing Ethan remembered was cold hands grabbing his face, and then silence. He awoke in his bed. Morning sun poured in through the window. The radiator clanked steadily, warm against the wall. It was 8:32 a.m. He sat up slowly, heart pounding. Had it been a dream? He rushed to the hallway, but the door was shut. Sealed tight. No signs of it ever opening. He asked Mr. Calhoun about it, but the old man just stared at him and muttered. Told you not to open it. That night, Ethan locked his door, turned up the radiator, and left the light on. He didn't sleep. He didn't dare. Because the whispers had changed. Now they said his name. Weeks passed. The other tenants noticed the difference. Ethan no longer spoke. He barely ate. He flinched at every creak of the floor. He kept his lights on all night and filled his room with white noise. One tenant, an elderly man named Briggs, cornered him in the hallway. You looked inside, didn't you? Ethan said nothing. Briggs nodded. I did too. Back in '79. Lost my brother to that door. They don't take you all at once. They take pieces. Sanity. Memories. Then finally. He didn't finish the sentence. Just walked away, muttering a prayer. Ethan tried to leave. He packed his things, called a cab, stood outside the building, but something was wrong. The street was off. Too quiet. No cars. No wind. The sun hung low and red in the sky, unmoving. He walked for blocks, but every turn brought him back to Belgrave Street. The boarding house never left his sight. Eventually, he gave up. He returned to room 2B. To the whispers. To the cold. And then, one night, the door opened again. Not to Ethan, but to someone new. A college student, fresh off the bus. Looking for cheap rent and no questions asked. Mr. Calhoun gave him a key. And a warning. Last door on the left. Don't open it. Ethan watched from his window. Watched as the new tenant smiled, nodded, and disappeared inside. Watched as the house groaned. As the air grew cold. Watched as the cycle began again. In room 2B, the mirror reappeared. And in its surface, Ethan's reflection twisted and grinned. Waiting.